How do you even begin to piece together a life from over 100 years ago? I mean, sometimes all you've got are these little breadcrumbs. Census data, a death certificate, maybe a random newspaper clipping if you're really lucky. Well, today, we're going to take those fragments and try to build the story of one really remarkable man, Alexander Sovereen.
So our story really kicks off with this amazing little snapshot from a newspaper reporter right around 1902. Get this, they find this guy, Alexander Sovereen, who's 87 years old. And he's not just, sitting on his porch. He is out in the field doing the incredibly tough work of cradling grain by hand. I mean, that's a skill that was already ancient by then. Right away, that one sentence tells you, okay, this is not your average person. We're talking about someone with some serious grit.
And if you think that's impressive, this incredibly tough guy wasn't just a hard worker. He was also a father. How many kids, you ask? 14. Yeah, you heard that right, 14 children. And that number, it's absolutely key to understanding his life. A life that was just packed with joy, but also, as we're about to see, some really deep, profound sorrow.
Okay, so to really get who this 87-year-old man in the field was, we've got to rewind, way back. Alexander was born in 1814 in a place they called Upper Canada back then. So you got to picture it. He was a pioneer kid, growing up on this rugged, tough frontier where something like a formal education, that was a total luxury, something most families just couldn't even think about.
In this next bit, this quote, it just tells you so much about what was going on inside his head. The newspaper said that Alexander felt that lack of education, really keenly, his whole life. And you can understand why, right? On the frontier, every pair of hands was needed. A kid's labor was just too valuable to send them off to a classroom. It was a tough reality, and it was something that really stuck with him.
But, his childhood wasn't all just hard work and feeling bad about school. Oh no, it was also filled with some classic kid mischief. So check this out. This is a story he still told when he was in his 80s. He and his older brother William, they decided it's a brilliant idea to start dropping stones down the chimney, just as dinner is on the fire below. You can imagine the cook, Sally Loader, was not thrilled. Stones and soot start raining into the pots. His brother manages to bolt, but little 6-year-old Alexander, he gets caught. And he gets what he later called the tarnalest lambasting he ever got in his life.
And hey, the mischief wasn't just for the kids. The adults got in on it too. This next story is about a local hunter, a guy named John McCall. Now, he was one of those guys who, after a few drinks at the tavern, loved to talk about how brave he was. So one night, he's going on, and he actually says he's so tough, he wouldn't be afraid to meet the devil himself on the walk home.
Well, wouldn't you know it, Alexander's dad, Frederick, happened to be there that night and heard the whole thing. And Frederick, he had this one very specific talent. He could imitate a wolf's howl so perfectly it would send chills down your spine. So he thinks to himself, okay, Mr. McCall, let's just see how brave you really are. He quietly slips out of the tavern, takes a shortcut, and hides in the woods along the path home. So, as McCall is stumbling home through the dark, this absolutely terrifying howl rips through the trees. McCall, trying to act tough, he yells something back into the darkness. Then, a second howl. He's probably getting a little nervous now, but he keeps walking. But then comes the third howl, even more chilling than the last. And that was it. Our brave hunter completely loses it, turns around and books it all the way back to the tavern, bursting in and swearing he was just chased by a whole pack of wolves. It just perfectly captures that rough and tumble humor of frontier life, doesn't it? So those stories give us a great feel for his younger years. But now we move into his adult life. In 1840, Alexander gets married to a woman named Eliza Putnam. And this is where the next huge chapter of his story begins. It's the chapter where those 14 children come into the picture, and it's a chapter that will bring him face to face with just unimaginable loss. Okay, this timeline, it only covers the first decade of their marriage. And honestly, it's just brutal. Just look at these dates with me. In 1845, they lose their daughter Rosella as an infant. The very next year, their son Frederick is gone, at only 3 years old. And then, 1849, what a devastating year. They lose 2 more daughters, Amart Ann and Rachel, who were only 2 and 1. 4 children gone in just 5 years. This was the heartbreaking, awful reality for so many families back then. So, aside from a few stories, the most solid proof we have of Alexander's life comes from the official records. I'm talking about the census, which was taken every 10 years, and these records give us these incredible, factual snapshots of his life. But they're not just dry data, not at all. If you look at them together, they're like chapters in a book.
showing us exactly how his life unfolded and changed over time.
All right, let's take a look at that first snapshot from 1851.
Okay, so here's our first census record from 1851. This is right after that decade of just terrible loss we talked about. We see Alexander, he's 40 years old, occupation, farmer. His wife, Eliza, is 30, and they've got their firstborn, Mary, who's 12. But then, look at this. The next child is Rachel, age 6. Now hang on a second. Didn't we just see that a daughter named Rachel died back in 1849? You see, this is the thing with historical records. They're not always perfect. This could be a different child with the same name, or maybe just a mistake by the census taker. It really shows you how tricky it can be to get the story exactly right.
All right, let's jump forward 10 years. Now we're in 1861, and the census shows a pretty big change in Alexander's life.
And this is really interesting. Suddenly, he's not a farmer anymore. His occupation is listed as innkeeper. Wow. So in his late 40s, he decides to make a massive career switch. He goes from farming the land to running an inn, which would have been like the center of the whole community. Why the change? The records don't tell us, but it definitely shows he wasn't afraid to try something new.
So did the innkeeper thing stick? Was that his new calling? Well, let's jump ahead another 10 years to the 1871 census and find out.
No, he's switched it up again. By 1871, at 56 years old, he's back to being a farmer. So it looks like the whole innkeeper adventure is over. And his house is just buzzing with activity. He and Eliza have 6 kids still at home, from a toddler of 3 all the way up to an 18-year-old. Can you just imagine the chaos and the energy and all the chores in that house?
And these last few census records really show his incredible persistence, but also the inevitable changes that come with getting older. I mean, in 1881, he's 67 and still farming. 10 years later, 1891, he's 76 and still farming. He even has an employee. But by 1901, the story has shifted. He's 86 years old now, the same age as when the reporter saw him in the field, but the census lists him as a widower. His wife, Eliza, is gone, and his home, once filled with his own kids, is now home to lodgers.
So the census gives us the what of his life. The jobs, the kids, the ages. But that old newspaper article, that gives us the who. It gives us a peek into his actual character. So after all that time, after almost a full century of living, what was his legacy? What did people remember about him?
Well, according to that reporter, it had nothing to do with how much land he had or how much money he'd saved up. Actually, the article pretty much says he wasn't a wealthy man at all. His real legacy was his character. And this quote, man, it just says it all. It paints this picture of a guy whose home was famous for his hospitality, a man who never, ever turned anyone away who was hungry or cold.
And then, just 5 years after that article was written, we reached the very last record, the death certificate. The facts here are about as simple and direct as it gets. Alexander Sovereen died August 15, 1907, age 93. Cause of death, old age. And his occupation, right to the very end, farmer.
But that newspaper article, it really gives us a much better final word on his life. This last quote is it's a perfect, beautiful summary. It says, he'll be remembered not just for the good things he actually did, but for the even greater good he wanted to do, for the incredible generosity that was in his heart, even if his wallet didn't always match it.
So the entire story of Alexander Sovereen's long life, we managed to piece it together from a few census forms, one death certificate, and the single lucky newspaper clipping. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? In our world today, with our endless digital footprints, all the data, the photos, the posts, 100 years from now, what story will all of our records leave behind?